What's up, everybody? It is Agent Weather Forecast here, back with another severe weather forecast. And this video, we're talking about the severe weather for portions of the South Central for the next 2 days, and as well possibly some more widespread severe weather later this week here into the Central and North Central United States here. But before we get into the forecast and the timing location for the severe weather within the next 3 days or so, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Of course, if you live in these areas that I have mentioned, I would recommend watching the video. And as well, if you want to get more updates every single day by the time the severe weather gets here, I would not only recommend subscribing, but as well hitting that bell icon so you can get notified as soon as I make that video. And as well, be sure to like this video so I know you guys like content like this, so I can continue to make it in the future. But without further ado, let's get in the video. So here's a look now at today's severe weather outlook here for day 1, and we do have a pretty large and widespread level 2 slight risk that goes all the way from portions of central and southern Texas all the way as far northeast as portions of southwestern Arkansas and portions of southeastern Oklahoma. This does include around 9 million people, as it is kind of in a more suburban and as well in general urbanized area. Including San Antonio, Austin, Shreveport, Waco, and Kyleen. As well, in the marginal risk, it includes around 27 million people, as it goes as far from the Gulf Coast there in the Mexico border to the Texas Panhandle, back down all the way up into portions there of these central United States there into portions of Missouri and Kansas, as far north as Kansas City there. We are going to be watching out for some scattered discrete cells later into the afternoon and evening hours here. But for San Antonio, Austin, Shreveport, Waco, and Kyleen, you guys are expected to get the worst severe weather for today. And of course, some widespread severe weather even out there for portions of the Gulf Coast there near Gulfport and Mobile. Tornado risk it's definitely there. There is a 5%, so I wouldn't say it's low, because obviously this is a slight risk for tornadoes. So we do have a slight risk for tornadoes, and obviously a 5% is definitely going to possibly bring the possibility for a few, maybe a couple scattered tornadoes throughout portions of specifically central and eastern Texas. So if we're going to be seeing any supercells that are tornadic, it will be in the region of between San Antonio into Tyler, Texas, will be the area we'll be watching out for maybe some tornadic or surface-based supercells. And then we have a very large, widespread 2% all the way from the Gulf Coast to portions of the central United States, and we do have a 2% there for the Gulf Coast and 2% there for portions of the Western Plains, which is the 28% with the three widespread 2% is the reasoning for the 27 million widespread marginal risk for today. So we have around 7.5 million people. So not everybody that is in that slight risk today is under the 5% chance for tornadoes, which is basically showing that there is going to be a slight risk for something else, whether it's wind or hail. And then we do have around 26 million people rounded up in that 2%. So same thing, not everybody in that marginal is under that 2% chance for a tornado. So it's kind of winded down to a specific region where we have a probability for tornadoes. The wind threat is exactly why we do have this slight risk. You can kind of see everything that's in the 15% is what we have so far today. So we don't have anything outside of that has a slight risk for any type of severe weather. So we do, of course, there you go, 8.4 basically million people there. San Antonio, Austin, Shreveport, Waco, and Tyler. So all the way there into portions of Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And of course, there's that very widespread 5% there marginal risk for winds. So as you do see, we don't have a marginal risk for winds for the Gulf Coast. Yeah, we do have a marginal risk for tornadoes in the Gulf Coast. So a little bit different scenario there. And then we have a winded down smaller region for a 15% for hail. So we can see possibly some larger hail specifically across Oklahoma and Texas. So it's going to kind of stay way to the west compared to where the slight risks go all the way into southwestern Arkansas and northwestern Louisiana. And that's because the lapse rate is going to be a lot higher in that region. So a lot better conditions for those large hail reports. But let's now go look at the day 2 outlook. So we do as well have let me zoom in really quickly here. We do as well have a slight risk for severe weather tomorrow, but down there in the tip of Texas near Brownsville. So the slight risk include around 2 million people down deep in the tip of Texas. Laredo, Brownsville, Harlingen, Mission, and Far, you guys are all in a slight risk. And then we have a pretty widespread marginal all the way into Kansas, and of course much of the South Central under a marginal. It includes around 18.4 million people. Low tornado threat, only a tornado probability there for the west central portion of Texas. So we're not looking at a big tornado threat tomorrow, but we are looking at possibly for a pretty potent wind and hail threat, and of course a pretty widespread slight risk as far as day 3 here for portions of the western plains here. This includes around 500,000 people, including Rapid City, South Dakota, Gillette, Wyoming, Scottsbluff, Nebraska, Sterling, Colorado, and Fort Morgan, Colorado. Typically, when you hear these names in my videos, they're for snowstorms and blizzards, but right now, as we get deeper into May and closer to June, we're going to start seeing some more severe weather up there into the northwest and western plains there, and around 5 million people under marginal all the way from Montana and North Dakota down into Texas. So pretty widespread marginal there. Denver, Colorado Springs, Aurora, Lakewood, and Fort Collins, you guys are in that marginal as well. So here's a look at what we have right now on the latest report here for yesterday's severe weather report. So obviously yesterday we had a moderate risk for wind, but we actually had a surprisingly high amount of tornadoes yesterday, 23. That does not sound high, but I don't think people were expecting a minor tornado outbreak, because anything over 10 tornadoes is considered a minor or a tornado outbreak in general. So 23 is basically a minor tornado outbreak. So we did see a surprisingly good amount of tornadoes, specifically there for portions there near south central and southwestern Louisiana there in the Parrish region, and as well a good amount of tornadoes across Texas Panhandle and New Mexico. We actually had around, I believe, 5 tornadoes in Mexico yesterday, and even I believe our first tornado of Wyoming for the year there, and another tornado just outside of Dodge City and Garden City there across Kansas. But we had around 129 reports. Definitely not as high amount of reports for wind than expected if it was a 45% SIG for winds, yet we only had 35 reports, so it's definitely a shock. And actually a lot of the reports weren't even in where we had that moderate, so I guess you could say the moderate did flop quite a bit here. I mean, I did not see a moderate at all. When I woke up yesterday, I was shocked when I saw that moderate. I said enhanced risk would have definitely verified, but I don't think that moderate did verify. But I think that 10% chance for tornadoes overall did verify. However, I don't think it verified for the right region. But again, that Louisiana tornadoes were definitely a shock here. But let's go ahead and look at the models and see the severe weather for the South Central for the next few days. So here's a look now at the NAM 3 kilometer here for the South Central. So let's go ahead and get a quick look at what we are seeing right now. So like I did say, we do have a slight risk for these areas basically throughout the day here in the evening hours and afternoon hours. So we're going to start seeing our first storms very, very soon here. I do believe we already have a tornado watch, or a medical discussion that issued the tornado watch for portions of east and central Texas, and we'll be looking at that later in the video if I do remember. But we're already starting to see some pretty severe storms across much of the South Central today, as of right now. But obviously the supercells are mainly, of course, going to stay in Texas. But as we go later on and out into the 9 o'clock region, we're seeing some pretty intense storms here across Texas there, as well as storms start to make their way to the northeast into Oklahoma, Arkansas, and near the Texarkana region, which is where we have the tip there of that slight risk. But as well, we have a pretty widespread marginal risk because of these storms all the way up here near Kansas City and portions of Missouri, as well as some pretty decent storms down there near the Gulf of Mexico. So we're seeing some pretty widespread storms overall across this region, with a bullseye for possibly tornadoes there, and hail and wind is going to be staying in Texas and Oklahoma. As we now go later on into the overnight hours at around 2 a.m., we're going to be seeing still some scattered storms here. Obviously going to be mainly more of a flooding threat at this point, and some relaxing storms to help people fall asleep, because at this point the tornadic activity will rapidly die off. I mean, you really won't be seeing any crazy hail reports, maybe pea to quarter sized hail, because obviously the last rates will rapidly die off in the overnight hours, since the sun is not providing that amount of energy there. And as well, KVADs will die off. However, temperatures will still remain pretty decent into the upper 60s and lower 70s overnight. So temperatures will be pretty good to sustain some more severe storms. But other than that, really won't be too crazy. as well into the rush hour time period across Texas. We're seeing some pretty severe storms near Houston as well. Some scattered storms across OKC. But as we now go to tomorrow morning, some pretty intense storms there right in the tip there of southern Texas. And of course, even across much of the south central, still some scattered storms, which is why, of course, we have a back-to-back large marginal risk that are over 25 million people for today and tomorrow. As we now go into tomorrow in the early afternoon, those storms will kind of start to go off into the coast there near Brownsville, but we're still going to be seeing some severe storms as that low pressure is on the backside of that system, providing a longer time period there of moisture. And by the time we get to 4 o'clock, those storms will start to move out of the southern portion of Texas. We will start to see still maybe a few storms right on the coast there near Brownsville, and maybe some storms there near Corpus Christi. But other than that, those storms should end by the mid-afternoon hour. Still some storms there across Texas and Oklahoma, and a few storms there across the Mississippi River Valley. So still some widespread severe weather tomorrow. As we now get into the 6 o'clock time period, though, for tomorrow, we're going to be seeing some increasing amounts of severe weather for east central Texas. So that's not including the slight risk, but some pretty good storms there, possibly near Tyler. Some pretty good storms down there, as well, even to portions of Louisiana and to tomorrow evening and afternoon. As we now go to overnight hours tomorrow, these storms will become less severe and just become more of a flooding through, because obviously we saw some really dangerous and significant flooding, and even possibly deadly flooding across Louisiana and eastern Texas yesterday. So this is going to bring in a pretty big threat, as we're going to be seeing more and more rain as we now get into Thursday now, possibly some more severe weather there for a portion of the coast of Texas and Louisiana. So it's just going to be a really saturated Gulf Coast and South Central for at least the next 3 days. Let's now go ahead and look at the Cape Valley. So right now we're seeing some pretty good Cape Valleys across much of the east and portion that's well down the deep south of Texas. But right now, really watching out for this region for severe weather at the moment, getting up to some scattered areas of nearly 2,600 to possibly 2,800 joules per kilogram there across east central Texas. So not bad at all. As when I go later into the evening hours, then near 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central, we're going to get some numbers of nearly 3,000 joules per kilogram there. So we're going to be seeing some increasing chances of severe weather there between possibly there Tyler, maybe some pretty good storms into the next few hours near San Antonio. But we're going to be seeing as well some scattered numbers of over 1,000 across the Kansas City region, as well going as far north as Missouri, which is why we're going to be seeing some very scattered severe weather today, and a very widespread marginal, but even getting nearly over 5,000 joules per kilogram there, deep in the tip there of southern Texas, as a result of the very warm temperatures getting into the triple digits. So it's going to definitely bring in some really high Cape values as we now go into tomorrow morning. As we go to tomorrow morning, of course, when we're going to start seeing that severe weather in the tip of Texas, we're going to be seeing possibly nearly 4,000 joules per kilogram, and it'll rapidly die off once we get into the afternoon hours. So not going to be seeing anything too crazy. But as we now get into 5 o'clock, that's when those storms will start to become more potent and present there across eastern Texas and Louisiana. They will become less severe but more flooding threats, but still seeing some Cape values. This is seeing possibly a few scattered discrete cells. That's getting nearly over 3,000 joules per kilogram. So going to definitely bring an interesting scenario. Let's now go ahead and look at the storm relative helicity here on 0 to 3 kilometers. So in the next few hours, we're going to be seeing some decent numbers here. Our highest numbers will be right there just outside of Austin, possibly getting nearly 300 meters per second squared. As well, actually meters squared per second squared, I said that wrong. As well as some scattered numbers up there as far north near Texarkana, over 200 seconds squared per second per meters, or hold on, wow, I just messed it up. This is what a Tuesday does to me. Meter squared per second squared. There we go. As we go later on here into the 7 o'clock, so 6 o'clock Central Time, we'll get some scattered numbers of over 400 meters squared per second squared there near Central Texas. So that's going to be the main area to watch out for those severe storms. But we can get some scattered, maybe scattered storms there near Tyler and all that, getting over 165 meters squared per second squared there as well. So really watching out for some pretty good SRH numbers. As we now go overnight hours, those numbers will gradually become a lot lower as we get into the morning hours. But tomorrow by 10 a.m., getting some decent storms there, or decent SRH down there near Brownsville and the deep tip there, Texas. Obviously, these storms are going to happen more in the late morning hours, so they're not going to be anything too crazy. And that's exactly why there's no tornado threat down there, because it's going to happen really in the late morning. Getting SRH values as high as possible, maybe nearly 400 meters square per second square, but that's going to be only for a really small area. After that, it's going to really die off, so maybe only 200 meters square per second square, though. So it's going to kind of really stay as minimal or minimum tomorrow. Let's go ahead and look at the supercell composite parameters. So right now we're going to be seeing, let's go the next few hours, some decent numbers across specifically East Central Texas, only around a 9 on the scale there, maybe as high as possibly 10 on the scale. So we're missing a smaller risk for supercells at the moment here, but as we go later on into the next few hours, we're missing some higher numbers there, as high as 18 near Austin and San Antonio, so we're missing a greater probability. But overall, some decent numbers kind of across eastern Texas as far as Arkansas and Oklahoma. So we're missing just a little linear area, possibly a probability of supercells between maybe 5 o'clock central to maybe around 7 o'clock central. And as we go overnight hours, obviously those numbers will really die off, and then we're missing a really low threat for supercells tomorrow morning here, so not going to really have to worry about that. Even for East Central Texas, by the evening hours, we're only going to be seeing maybe a 7 or 8. So overall tomorrow it's going to be very minimal, so no worries about that. Let's now go ahead and last but not least, before we look at the shear values, look at the significant tornado parameter, and we will be seeing some numbers there across East Central Texas. Later on, going to get maybe up to a 4, possibly maybe later on a widespread 6 or so, but really not going to be seeing a great probability for tornadoes today, as well even a lower threat there for tomorrow. No numbers down there. Really, the only threat for tornadoes tomorrow will be down there or up there near the western panhandle, which is where we had that 2% kind of right here into the evening hours. We'll be watching out for our tornado threat, but we're not going to be seeing any other than that. Not going to be really watching out for a tornado threat for Texas tomorrow. And even today's a 5%. I don't see more than maybe 6 or 5 tornadoes. Or no, I don't see more than 10 tornadoes. Let's just go with that. Today, I will get shocked. I will be shocked if there are more than 10 tornadoes today in Texas. Let's now go ahead and look at the shear values from 0 to 6 kilometers, so showing the difference between the shear values in the surface to 6 kilometers in the atmosphere. So it's going to kind of be seeing how unstable the atmosphere is and just how much shear there is as a result of this low level jet in the upper atmosphere, and the difference. By basically right now, we're starting to see some pretty good numbers up there near central and northern Texas, getting as high as possibly 70. Or no, that's not for Texas. That's going to be for Colorado, getting as high as possibly 50 to 60 knots difference. A pretty good amount of shear between the surface and the 6 kilometers. As we go later on, near San Antonio and central Texas, getting as high as possibly nearly 90 knots. So really extreme amount of shear there into the mid layer of the atmosphere. So we're going to be seeing definitely some pretty favorable conditions as a result of this low level jet for a storm to blow up there by the next, I'd say, 3 hours or so, maybe 2 hours across portions of central Texas. And it's going to definitely be something to keep a close eye on. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and bye guys.